Okay, so from the film Telos or Bust, Brad Abrams, if you're here, if you want to come on up. Is he here? Brad? Oh, all right. All right, so women in the front seat, we have Indy Saini with us. And we have, I believe, some of the film subjects. We have Tiara Shipton here as well, if you want to come on up. Do we have any other subjects from the film? No?
No, just her.
All right, here you go. Okay. All right, thank you both for being here. Congratulations on this incredibly inspirational film. One of the things, that I love about this film is that I always am fascinated by people who are living their lives outside of the norm, so to speak, freely and independently. So if you could speak a little bit about, what inspired you to take this lifestyle and translate it into a film.
Well, I started writing in my early 20s, and I think that experience of discovering that culture and that freedom at that age, when I was just sort of like finding my own identity and figuring out who I was, and not like having the confidence to be out in the world in other kinds of ways. I think that it just led me to want to, it helped me find my own sense of independence. And I think for everybody who rides a motorcycle, men or women or anybody, it really is about sort of just embracing who you are and what you want to be doing. Because it's a choice of life and death. Yeah. I mean, like anything is, getting into a car or whatever, but there is like sort of a more compelling thing. And I think people who are drawn to it are also just drawn to like wanting to be in the world as aggressively and free as possible.
And Tiara, for your when you were first approached about this, how did you feel about sharing your experiences on film?
I was approached before, and I passed it up thinking I wasn't the one that should have been in the film. So when Indy approached, I thought, okay, I won't get out of the way this time. I'll get right in the line and allow her to ask me whatever she needs so that I can be the voice that other women tell me that they want to hear, that they want to be on bikes. Older women, 80s, they'll stop me in the front of CVS and say, wow, you were so hot. Like, I wanted to ride my whole life, and I didn't do it because some man told me I was too uncoordinated, or I was afraid because I was a woman and this was a man's sport. But no, it's the same as anything else that you enjoy doing. If it's your clothing that you like or your cologne, it makes us happy. When we put the bike on, that's how I feel. I get on this, I become one with it. It becomes part of who I am. The way it purrs, the way it moves, its weight. I exercise on my bike. So if there's an option, whether I'm going to take the bike or a car or a boat, I'm probably going to take a bike. I'm going to take a bike, whether it's to the coffee shop or to get something to drink. I'm going to take the bike. So do I hike? When the sun's not out. Otherwise, it's the bike.
Is the text is on your face.
Oh.
Keep going a little more to the blank spot. There you go.
Thank you.
All right. So, Indy, so what were some of the challenges in getting the film made? I mean, I imagine to make a feature-length documentary was probably a difficult task. Was it a long process, or what were some of the challenges in getting it together?
It was a much longer process than I expected, partially because when I started out, I didn't plan to make a feature documentary. When I started out, I basically, I bought the bike. I just finished a film that I was working on as a camera person, which is what I do as my bread and butter job. And I wanted to go out and meet the amazing women who rode up until that point, which was 2017. I'd only ever ridden with men. So I literally was like, I know the number of women writers is growing. I'm going to go find them. And so but I thought I was going to just like shoot some interviews and do profile pieces and put up a web series within 3 months. And then as I was writing and meeting the women along the way, like their stories were so compelling and inspiring to me, you know, the thousands of miles on the bike, like all this other stuff is forming. And I was like, okay, this has got to be something different. And as I was editing it and, you know, just trying to figure out how all the stories intertwined, I did some feedback screenings and got responses of like, oh, this person's story is really interesting. This one is. So then I went out and got more information. Like I went to visit Tiara in her home in Seattle and, you know, back to Chicago and I, you know, to flush out all that stuff. So then it became like longer and, you know, challenging because then it requires more money.
So you know, initially you were thinking like an episodic kind of thing, a streaming kind of series. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, just something on the web, you know, just to like, just talk about, like, just get more imagery of women writers out there because although it's really grown a lot in the past few years, I think still like the predominant idea of women writers is not the women in this movie. So.
Do we have any questions from anyone in the audience? Anybody want to raise their hand? Yes, sir.
It was a great movie, very entertaining, and I wonder how you kind of structured things, like in terms of the structure, because it was, like I said, it's very entertaining, and often like talking heads, there's a lot of talking heads is not. So I wonder, how you came to the structure of the film.
Well, to answer that question, and actually part of what your last question was as well, that was probably the hardest part of making this film. Because when I was first working on it, I mean, at first I thought it was going to be linear because I literally was riding across the country. And I thought, you know, it does, you know, sort of tell my story loosely throughout it. But because the themes and the stories of all the women, how they interwove, I had to figure out how to make it nonlinear, to make a linear story nonlinear. And to be honest, I couldn't figure it out. And I went through 4 editors. And I finally found a woman who had just been nominated for an Emmy for Defying Gravity, that gymnastics film. And she had gotten some other personal documentaries into film festivals. And I sent her the rough cut, and she loved it and wanted to do it. And so she's the one who was, even in the interview, she's like, oh, I was thinking like we could do this segment and make it like this. And I was like, oh, you are so hired. Thank goodness for her.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
So you have so many great wide shots all over the country and the world. Were you personally filming all of those, or did you get some input from other filmmakers?
Well, the drone shots, all kind of like I lucked into them. Like you always want to have drone shots, but it was like in the first location, a woman who I'd been working with who came to help out for my first set of interviews. She's like, "Oh, I have a drone. Do you want me to bring that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then in Providence, it was like, oh, my boyfriend has a drone. Should he bring it? And I was like, yeah. And then in Arizona, that rider was like, oh, my boyfriend has a drone. Should he bring it? And I was like, yeah. You know?
And that's what we say, the universe makes it happen.
Yes.
To Alaska, were you in Alaska with somebody with a drone?
No, Allison, and that was the other thing is that like, you know, all the riders who offered their stories also were like really supportive with providing footage. Like Allison shot a lot of footage and pictures, and so, and like a lot of that, like the off-roading stuff was Sarah. That's footage that was provided by her. The Allison footage was provided by her. So a lot of like the B-roll stuff came from the riders themselves.
We're usually recording. It might be our last ride. We enjoy it.
Any other questions? Any other questions? So, you know, one of the things that, and it's addressed in the film, but you know, and it's something that I think most people struggle with. How do you, and this is a question for both of you, for Indy and Tiara, how do you balance your, personal lives and responsibilities with your passion?
Ooh.
And how difficult is that? Which I imagine it is.
Oh, balancing the love of motorcycles. I usually sneak it in, and I do it the full year. I rent bikes as well, so whenever I travel, I also pick up a bike wherever I am. But any excuse to get on the bike, any excuse. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so it's raining. I'm not typically a rain rider, just long enough to make sure that I can. So I'll plan it one direction, but not both. I saw you braving it out. I ride enough so that I can survive in other countries and things when I ride. But making sure I take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves, when other people are going on trips down to Guatemala, then jumping on that one and saying, hey, we're going to go do this, and this comes first. Making sure I don't pass up on opportunities because somebody else says, well, women aren't allowed in that country, and, they don't really appreciate it. Well, then you YouTube it and you see them throwing things at women, and you're like, okay. Yeah, so we just kind of still stay true to what we believe, which is the love of writing, and embrace it and figure it out. Do it as much as we can, whenever we can. Jump on things like this and realize how similar those stories are. For me, the more questions Indy asked me, the more I realized why she was making the film. Before, it's like, we're riding bikes with engines. Like, what is the big deal? Like, there's not that big of a deal here until you hear people speak. And then you realize, oh, this doesn't just happen to me, right? That wasn't just me that was that the man said, hey, well, do you have a bike of your own? You say, yeah, and then they say, we only ride with men. It's like, ouch, right? And that's in my own neighborhood that happened. And you're thinking, well, why am I not good enough to ride with you? I can ride the ride,
What
right?
neighborhood in Seattle do you live in?
Kirkland. Well, we have a property in Kirkland
wow,
and in
okay.
Kenmore, so yeah.
And then Mount Baker neighborhood in Seattle on the other side of the lake.
Yeah, so that's where we are. But it happens down no matter where you are. I'm from California originally, so yeah, that's why we have female groups, so we can ride with our own. There's men that let us ride with them, but we want them to be more inclusive.
Did you want to also?
I'll just say, for me, my mom doesn't like that I ride. But when I first learned to ride in my early 20s, and she came to visit me, I was living in Hawaii at the time, and she was not crazy about it. She did actually get on the back, and I went for a big loop around this parking lot. She's like, okay, I'm done. That's you go do what you have to do.
And that's another one. I also sneak in. I ride my dates, so I'm dating. So if I have an opportunity to ride a date, then I pick them up on the bike.
Yeah.
And if
my
they
first
ride-
date with my ex-husband, I picked him up,
Yeah.
and he rode on the back of my bike, and we went and watched the sunrise somewhere. So
It's kind of a test there.
Yeah.
If he's willing to get on the back, he might be a keeper.
exactly.
Right? Especially if he's a biker, and we'll get on the back.
Exactly,
Right? If he's
yeah.
a biker, we'll keep him.
We have time for one more question. If anybody wants to ask a question. And okay, yes, go ahead.
Great film, excellent. The soundtrack's great. What was the inspiration? I mean, you recorded a lot of instruments and stuff. I was looking at it, so it was not just a synthesized deal. So what's the deal on that? It's great.
So, again, it was the same with my editor. I found Catherine, who composed all the music, within a couple weeks of finding my editor, Esther. And I saw her on a panel, and I just loved what she had to say about how she worked with people. And I approached her, sent her the rough cut, and she was like, I'm in. And she's like, I think that, we could get a grant for this. And she's like, I'll do all the work. She submitted the grant. A month later, we had $20,000 to record all the music live.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, so she, and before we even started working on it, she in her mind, she was she put together themes for each of the featured women. So every one of the women had their own instruments. She's like, oh, I see, such and such instruments for Tiara, and obviously Mac had a trumpet, in her theme. And so she worked all that out before she even had a conversation with me, and she's like, "This is what I'm thinking." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's amazing." But yeah, she also has this score production company. So she composed all the music, and then Joy House Music did all the score production, and it was like a 40-string orchestra, and I mean, it was amazing. Yeah.
I'm going back to find out my instruments. I need to know my theme song. I didn't realize I had my own instruments. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a very important film to see because even for people who are not, maybe interested in riding motorcycles, but it's still, inspirational in terms of, doing something you want to do, following your passion. There's a lot of inspirational dialogue in there. Towards the end, it said there was a line, fear is a good thing, it means you're alive, and there's just so much about it that I think is universal. So anyway, that said, my final question is the film going to be coming out? Is it getting distributed? Is it going to be released? Is it playing other festivals? What's the next step?
There's a couple festivals left, but I did just get a distribution offer this past week.
All right, congratulations.
So, yeah, so it'll be out on Amazon Prime in the beginning of
Yay.
2023.
Oh, wonderful.
All right, great news. That's great. Okay.
Those people, yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both,
I need
Indy, Saini, and I would like to thank Tiara Shipton as well. Thank you both for being here, women in the front seat. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
All right.
Jonathan.
Thank you.
And thank you, Big Apple Film Festival. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you.
Oh my God. So